Good morning, West End, and happy Easter. I'm so excited to be here sharing with you my mother's recipe for hot cross buns, which always graced our Easter table when I was growing up. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Julian. I'm Reverend Sam's partner, and I'm so thrilled to be sharing this with you today. One of the things I've been doing a lot of in the past year is teaching baking via virtual classes. I've been working as a pastry chef in New York City for about 15 years, so I'm really excited to share this with you. There are just a couple quick notes before we get started about some little tricks that I've found really help with this. Mainly we're talking about dried fruit, raisins, and I'm going to use a little bit of chopped citron, candied citron peel. You can use candied lemon peel or candied orange peel, or you can just leave it out. Whenever you're using dried fruit in a recipe, you're going to put that in the oven and it's going to dry it out even more. So a really good leg up I learned from an old chef of mine is to rehydrate it with some water just off the boil, let it sit and soak in for about 15 minutes, and then drain it. And you will want to make sure that those are well drained before you put them in, even pat them with a paper towel just to make sure. The only other note before we begin is about yeast. If you're using instant yeast, rapid rise, same thing. You can add that directly in with your dry ingredients. That's what I'm going to do here. If you're using active dry yeast, take your packet of yeast and before you begin, about 10 minutes, bloom that by adding it to your warm milk and water combination. And I'll mention that as we go through. So let's dive right in and see how to make this really scrumptious Easter dough. The first thing I've done is I've greased a bowl I'm going to use for proofing. It's nice to have a clean bowl. I've just greased that with a little soft butter and I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to begin by taking 2¼ cups of flour in a separate bowl. So I've measured that in there, 2¼ cups of all-purpose flour. To this bowl, I'm going to add 1/4 cup of water and 1/4 cup of milk. I'm using buttermilk. If you have it, that's fine. These are lukewarm. The next sort of unconventional ingredient in some bread doughs, you do find it, is a mashed potato. This is just under 1/2 cup of mashed potato. It's pretty bland. This is about 3 ounces or 1/2 cup of finished mashed potato. Next, I'm going to add some sugar. This is 1/4 cup, regular old white sugar. And then salt. This is kosher salt. I'm going to use 3/4 teaspoon. If you don't have kosher salt, if you have a finer salt like table salt or a finer sea salt, use just about a 1/2 teaspoon. It's a little saltier than kosher salt. The next thing I'm going to add is 1/4 cup or about 2 ounces, okay, 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter, and you can see that's very soft. That'll make it really easy to mix in with our dough here. Then I'm going to add 1 egg. And next I'm going to add a couple spices. This is a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and I've also got in here a little pinch, maybe 1/8 teaspoon of mace. I really love mace. It's kind of a very old-fashioned flavor. I'm used to it in this dough. You can substitute a little grating of nutmeg, or you can leave it out. And now, because I'm using instant yeast, I can add it right in here. This is 1 3/4 teaspoons of instant yeast. That equates to about 1 packet of active dry yeast. And again, if you're using active dry, just bloom it in that lukewarm or even warm milk and water combo for about 10 minutes before you start mixing your dough. All right, I'm going to add about 1/2 of this flour. This will create kind of a batter that'll make it really easy to mix everything together. This is the very same bowl, actually, that my mother used to use to make all of our bread dough. Okay, there are a few lumps still in there, but that's okay. We're going to mix it quite a bit more. That's pretty smooth as it goes. I'm going to add the rest of the flour, and then I'm just going to get this incorporated. All right, that's actually as far as we need to go on that. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to just take some flour and dust my work surface, okay? I want to avoid using too much flour. You don't want to dry out your dough excessively, so I'm going to move some of that to the side, and then I can pull some in as I need it during the kneading process. No pun intended. So let's get our dough out here. Okay, set the big bowl aside. Now, I've got my raisins and my citron here, and I'm just going to put them on top of this. You can do this in the bowl too. Just going to mash them into this dough. A really handy tool, if you don't have it, is this little dough scraper. If you're making any kind of dough, it really helps you move it around, especially if things are a little sticky or wet, as dough often is. Okay, Now I'm really ready to begin kneading. This is holding together, and I'm going to start the kneading process. The way that I like to knead this dough, same way I would knead my mother's cinnamon roll dough actually, is I just count to 200 and I do 200 turns. Just pull in more flour as you need it, but try not to get things too dry. Let it be a little sticky. If it does this, it's a great place to have that. You can keep your dough together, get a little more flour on your countertop, and continue kneading. You can certainly do this in a mixer, but I do think you'll find the results are a little more tender when you knead it by hand. It's not a very heavy dough, so it's not too difficult. Okay, this is now nice and smooth. You can see that it's formed a beautiful smooth surface. There are some raisins and citron poking out, that's fine. This is now ready to proof. I'm going to take the greased bowl that I have, and I'm going to take the top, okay, which is the smooth side. That was the side that was on the counter. I'm going to put that in the bottom of the bowl and just move it around a little bit to cover that with some of that soft butter, and then I'll invert it. All right. The length of time it will take your dough to proof will depend on the temperature of your dough and the temperature of your kitchen. Yeast really likes, the mid-high 80s. Your kitchen hopefully isn't quite that warm yet. But, give it an hour and a half or 2 hours until it's doubled. And I'll show you how we test for doneness. I'm going to cover this with a damp towel. You can certainly use plastic wrap, and we'll take a look at it in about an hour and a half. See you then. And we're back. Let's take a look and see how our dough did after about 2 hours. You can see that that's nicely risen. It's really puffed up. A little trick is to take a moistened finger and press a little indentation in it. If it doesn't spring back right away, if the indentation stays in the dough and moves only slowly, you're good to go. You're ready. You're fully proofed. I have buttered a 9x13 baking dish. You can certainly use a half sheet tray for this. I have many times. It works just fine. I instructed, I think, in the recipe for 16 pieces. I'm actually going to divide this into 15 pieces. I think 3 rows of 5 will work really well in there. Depending on your pan, it might be 12. It might be 4 rows of 3, however that works out. So just gently coax your dough out of your pan here. Beautiful, soft, supple dough. I'm going to lightly flour the top just so it doesn't stick too much to my hands. Since I'm dividing this into 15 pieces, I'm just going to try to first divide it into 3 equal pieces. I'm deflating it lightly. That's what we want to do to get any large bubbles out. All right, I'm going to divide this into thirds to begin. Now, if you wonder why pastry chefs and restaurants and shops make everything identical, it's we use this little trick. We just weigh everything, so they are identical. So I probably will go through and weigh all of these so that they're all the same weight, which will be based, of course, on the total weight of the dough. Our total dough weight here is just over 30 ounces, so I'm going to divide them into about 2-ounce pieces. You can see, obviously, this one's going to give me more rolls than that one, so we're not going to obsess about it. I'm going to go for about 2-ounce pieces. As long as they're about equal, you're going to be fine. Okay, these are now corrected, so I'm going to just show you quickly the shaping method that I like to use. So I'm going to take a piece here and just begin by pre-shaping it, gently sort of just tucking all the folds on what will become the bottom onto the bottom. Okay, and then I'm going to set that one aside. I'm going to do that to all these rolls, and I'm going to put them in the same order so I work in the same way twice. Okay, now that these are all pre-shaped, I'm going to just finish the shaping. This is where I'm going to use this little damp cloth to just wipe a little bit of a moist space there, and then keeping this hand a little bit floured, I'm just going to kind of press down on it while I cup my hand. That'll just help round it out. It takes a little practice to get this skill down, but don't worry about it. Honestly, just push them around. And once you're done shaping here, you can go right into your pan. So we'll do that here. I'm going in the same order I went when I pre-shaped them just because those will have had the longest rest and they'll be the most flexible. So I'm going to fill my pan that way. And there we've got our evenly spaced rolls in there. In the instructions I provided, it says to space them 2 inches apart. That's if you're doing them on a sheet tray and you want them each individual little buns. In this pan, they're going to bake together and have sort of squarish sides because I'm going to pull them apart. That's how I grew up with them, and that's kind of how I like them. Now, we need to cut our crosses before we give these their second rise. You can use scissors by snipping vertically at each roll, or my mother told me she just used to use a knife, so I'm going to try that today. So just drag a sharp knife across the tops in one direction and then in the other. I don't know that this is easier than using scissors, but we can't break with tradition. I'm going to cover these up again. They're going to need about 45 minutes in this kitchen today. Again, you're looking for them to be nice, puffy, raisin rolls, and then we're going to glaze and bake them. While your buns are proofing, preheat your oven. Give it at least half an hour to come to 350 degrees. Meanwhile, mix 1 egg yolk with a couple teaspoons of cold water in a little dish, so we're ready to glaze as soon as they're proofed. We are back again, and this has been about an hour. It's a little cool in my kitchen today, so these took about an hour to proof, and here's what they look like now. So you can see they're nice and puffy. I've got some egg yolk, 1 egg yolk beaten with a teaspoon or 2 of cold water, and I'm just going to gently brush all of these rolls. This will help them get a really nice golden color in the oven. Okay, those look great. I'm going to pop those into my fully preheated 350 degree oven for about 20 minutes. Baking tends to be seen as this very precise thing. You have to be very exact, but always then the recipe says 15 to 20 minutes. Well, which is it? The reason that varies so much is because your dough is a different temperature than mine, your kitchen is a different temperature than mine, and your oven has a very different idea than mine about what 350 degrees actually is. So we'll learn to judge doneness. The best advice I can give you is to check halfway through. So I'm going to throw these in the oven for 20 minutes, but I'm going to take a peek at 10 or 12 minutes and see how they're coming along. And then we'll see them right back on this counter. Be right back. Okay, we are finally at the last step of our hot crust buns. I've pulled them out of the oven. You can see this beautiful golden brown color on top. There's some lighter spaces in between, of course, that's pretty normal to have it in there. These aren't as cool as I would want them to be to start the glazing process, but I really wanted to get them going. So I'm going to show you how to do the glaze. With 1/2 cup of confectioner's sugar, I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of water. And actually, I'm going to add a little vanilla extract to this as well. Probably just about 1/4 teaspoon, just to give it a little extra flavor, just to make it a little extra happy on top. That might be more like 1/2 teaspoon. That's okay. So I'm just going to stir this until it's nice and smooth and all the confectioner's sugar is incorporated. All right, that looks pretty good. Now, using the same fork, I'm just going to take small forkfuls of this and I'm going to drizzle it across the crosses on our buns to create our hot cross buns. You want to move very carefully from left to right. Just move your arm in a straight line and you'll be totally fine. And then move right back the way you came. Just try to think about the whole line across all the buns. You can see it running a little bit because these are a little warm. It normally might stay put a little better than that if you have the patience to wait until they're cool. I know myself and I do not. So I'm going to glaze them all in one direction and then we'll move on to the other direction. Those look just about as good as I need them to. And you might want to put these on a cooling rack. You can do this before you glaze them or after. I like to just pry them right out of the pan. They come out really easily using an offset spatula or another little metal spatula. They'll pop right out. You can put them on a cooling rack if you'd like. All right, so we will pry this one out and we will see how our nice warm hot cross bun looks and tastes. It's a beautiful moist dough. You can see the big plump raisins in there. They're not dried out. It's really, really lovely, lovely roll. All right, and here's our bun. It tastes like Easter. Reminds me of my childhood. The raisin flavor gets through the whole dough. The citron is a beautiful addition if you can find it, with or without it. This is a really, really lovely roll. I wish you all a happy Easter. Pardon me for talking with my mouth full. Thank you, West End. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.